You have no choice in a lot of circumstances. So saying yes to your fear and jumping in is the only way. When you have a choice, like, well, am I going to not go into this interview, or am I just going to go through my fear and do my best? That could be for a job interview, that could be a television interview, whatever it is. You carry on through.
Hey, Leadup listeners, Mike Harbor, another great episode on the Leadup Podcast. I'm really excited. I've got a fellow by the name of Andrew Thompson on the podcast with me today. Andrew's the author of a book called A High-Performing Mind. And if you've been listening to the Leadup Podcast for any amount of time, you know that I talk about mindset and how important it is to lead well, lead ourselves well, and lead others well. So I'm really excited to dive into the concepts of Andrew's book with him today. Andrew is a former professional athlete. We're going to learn more about that and how important mindset is to performing at a high level, and also a survivor of a rare illness and how mindset helped him thrive through that illness and get himself to a place of living life at his fullest again today. Andrew, welcome to the Leadup Podcast. Glad to have you.
Thanks, Mike. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, really excited. As you and I were talking in the green room, I think mindset is the most important thing in all of life. No matter what we do, I think in order to lead well, it begins with, what we think about ourselves, what we think about others, what we say to ourselves. And so I don't want to, steal the show here, but talk to us a little bit about in your book and where you talk about your journey to here, and what was the premise behind you writing A High-Performing Mind?
I agree with your words. Mindset really is, your mind can either work for you or against you. And we learn that quickly in life, and you see it in others. And those who have their minds work for them, their lives go a little more smoothly, and those who don't find troubles where there aren't some at times. But in my case, I guess 2016 was sort of a turning point in my life. I stumbled into a rare illness inadvertently. I'd started a 3-day fast, and about midway through that fast, I found myself having a medical reaction that was not good. Debilitating weakness, shaking, vibrating in my body. I could barely get out of bed, and that led to a very tumultuous time in my life. Basically hospitalized in ICU. Returned home prematurely, had to crawl up a flight of stairs to make it to my bedroom. Took me an hour to recover from that exertion at the top of the stairs, where I just kind of lie on my side panting. Next thing I know is I find myself bedridden for the next 4.5 months, 22 hours a day, so weak that I could barely make it down the stairs. I ended up missing my son's 3rd-year birthday, which, is always a special time in life. I just couldn't do it. Things like intense conversations or watching TV or, like I said, going up a flight of stairs were enough to put me out of action for prolonged periods of time. In and out of hospitals for months. Doctors didn't really have any solutions, though they did identify that I suffered from a rare condition called hypophosphatemia, which meant my body was unable to absorb phosphate correctly. Phosphate's really important. It creates all your energy in your body, particularly energy that's responsible for above resting heart rate exertion. So that's the sports coach in me talking. Try to keep it in layman's terms for the most part. But so I wasn't able to really raise my resting heart rate much above resting heart rate for about 8 years without dire consequences, hospitalizations, needing phosphate drips, and feeling like I was going to die on numerous occasions. And, being close to it, the hypophosphatemia comes along with the risk of cardiac and respiratory failure. So, your organs they run intensely with phosphate. So when that's not there, you have to be very, very careful. And that's sort of the way things started for me. But, backing up a step, until that point in my life, I lived a very normal life. I used to, one thing I used to do, I used to ask people, would you rate your level of happiness? I usually get answers back from people. It's just a hobby question. Somewhere between 7 and 8, 6, 7, 8, 9, sometimes very rarely above 8, I guess. But if anybody had asked me, I always said, 9, 9.5, having a great life, loving life, things are going well. And I went from a 9 to a -9, like into debilitating physical condition, but also depression and just there was a point there when I never thought I would recover. So that was hard to go through. And mindset, circling back here, was critical for me getting out of that situation. I drew from my times as a professional athlete and kind of took that approach eventually. I had to go through a phase where I wasn't doing much other than just making it through a day. But once I got through that, I used mindset and, characteristics of a high performing mind that I write about in my book to pull myself out of that situation.
Man, that's crazy. I've tried to do a few fasts in my life. Matter of fact, I just did a fruit and nut fast just a few weeks ago because I had a weekend where I ate really bad and I was feeling just, lethargic. Body didn't feel good, some allergy issues. But I'd never do a complete, fast, Andrew, because I have hangry issues, if you know what I mean. So,
I hear you.
I got to have a little something. So just tons of water, fruit, nuts. But I've never really tried to do a complete fast. Is that something that triggered the illness that you suffered?
The doctor suggests, well, one recommendation was never do this again. And I was like, don't worry, I'll never do this again. But I had done it 4 or 5 times prior to that for 36-hour fasts. And it was always just a thing I did to be healthy, give your body a chance to reset, clear out your intestinal tract, whatever it is, let your energy systems recover. But most likely, one of the leading theories was that I accumulated a toxic load of mold and mercury. I had a high tuna fish consumption in my younger years. I thought it was a great protein to have before training. So I did a lot of that. So one doctor calculated my mercury load and said it was incredibly high. And then I was also in an office that was actually had mold coming through the ducts. And then in addition to that, at home, unbeknownst to us, there was also mold coming through the vents. So I had a high level of mold in my environment for years. So that toxic load accumulated. And then when I did the fast and my body had no normal, regular energy, it was just unable to keep up. And one of the theories is that like the mercury or whatever created damage to my small intestinal tract, which is a key part of absorbing phosphate along with your kidneys. So there's lots of theories out there. At the end of the day, it's not typically something people recover from, but through very studious approach to diet and a computer programmer's approach, actually, where, one thing in, one thing out over months and months, I developed a diet that I believe, well, not only did it 100% give me energy to be able to get back to work. I started back at work only 2 hours a day. That's all I could manage. It took me a year and a half to get up to 7 hours a day. And I was a person who used to run around at work, run up the stairs. Like I had unlimited energy. And to go from that, from barely making it through my day. But the diet was key for me, my recovery, especially since the medical system didn't really have any solutions other than things that didn't work for me. And it took many years, but eventually now I'm actually back to playing the sport I played professionally again, and which is an incredibly intense sport for cardiovascular output. And I'm having no issues. I'm able to bike and lift weights and all those things that would have hospitalized me in the past. So it took a long time. And I kind of discovered that it was behind me by accident on a trip where I did a hike. And I was like, oh, that was harder than I expected. How is that going to be for me? Because it would usually take a few hours to feel the consequences. And then I didn't have any consequences. And I was like, oh, that's so strange. And then I just sort of tested the waters further and further and discovered, wow, I can actually live a normal life again, which was like one of the most fantastic things to happen because I almost resigned myself to never recovering at one point.
Yeah. Well, that's incredible, man. I'm a big believer. I'm 55 right now. I started changing my approach to life a little bit. Well, when I started changing my approach to life 30 years ago, but my approach to eating and diet probably about 10 years ago because I started having tons of joint pain and, different things and just really changed what I put into my body. I think the food industry has done us a disservice, fast foods, all the chemicals, things, and I don't eat 100% clean and natural. I'm not that rigid with it, but meats and like I just got an order this morning. I buy all natural beef. I buy a half a cow a couple times a year because I'm still a meat eater, right? And we try to eat clean meats and things of that nature. Diet is a huge deal for not only our physical abilities, but our mental capacity as well. And I found that for me, it all kind of started. My wife got into these oils 10 years ago, essential oils, right? And I used to think, she's a little weird. I don't know what's going on with her, but at the time, this is no lie, Andrew, I was popping ibuprofen 3 or 4 times a day because I just had so much kind of joint pain, back pain, and I don't take any synthetic drugs anymore ever, and completely got off of that, and still have some pains, right? As a matter of fact, my son and I 2 years ago, 23, we went on a 2-week hiking trip. Part of that hiking trip was hiking to the bottom of the Grand Canyon and camping a couple nights and hiking back out. A mindset challenge, by the way. But then that was in May, and then in September of 23, I blew a disc in my back, herniated a disc in my back. So had not a long time illness like you had, but, I went from hiking, carrying 40 pounds on my back to I couldn't even walk. Like I had to crawl to the bathroom. So much pain. Had to take some synthetic painkillers at that point just for a couple of weeks to get me through and be able to sleep. But let's talk about, and we got a little similar story in that. Talk about how important your mindset. First, I want to ask you about your professional. What did you do professionally as an athlete? And then how did your mindset help you there? And then where was your mindset so important in that 8-year stretch of really having a different life?
Yeah, those are great questions. I just want to say, we athletes used to call ibuprofen vitamin I. That's how often you take it as an athlete. So I do live clean now. It's I don't take painkillers. I don't drink anymore. I just started back drinking a little bit. I try a sip of a beer here and there. That's new for me, but I couldn't do any of that during that time. But back to my sport you're asking. So a lesser known sport. It's called squash. So similar to tennis, except in a 4-wall room. So I played on the world tour back in the day, while being a coach, a teaching professional. So it was a great sport because it's Forbes magazine once ranked it the most challenging sport in the world for fitness. That and boxing. I can't remember if squash came in 1 or 2, but it was out of 50 sports, it was ranked 1st or 2nd. So it is incredibly demanding. You have to be very, very fit and train many hours a day. So that was what I did. And it taught me a lot about life. It taught me about balance. It taught me how to perform at my best. It taught me how to overcome fears. It taught me a huge amount. And I did use all those things to overcome my illness. If it wasn't for that training as an athlete and a high performance coach, I don't know where I'd be today. But it all started with, I mentioned earlier about going through the difficult phase of the emotions. How am I ever going to make ends meet to support my family? Will I ever be able to work again? Will I ever be able to exercise again? When one of my favorite things in the world was to work out. All those things cross your mind, and you go through this mourning period, as you've lost your entire life, everything that makes you happy. But what had to happen was a transition from all these negative thoughts to positive actions. I always say positive actions will always trump negative thinking. And it's important to make that transition. And I did. And I started to identify, as I mentioned earlier, a diet. And that was my first step out. Obviously, I did a lot of research. I started with a kidney disease diet because it was kidney dysfunction initially. And I followed that and I built my own diet from there. Very, very healthy. A lot of things to reduce toxins in your body. So that was my first positive action. And then I required other positive actions like getting back to work, maybe prematurely from my organization's at the time perspective. I think they were appreciative of having me back, but, I had lost a lot of weight. I looked emaciated in some ways, but I'm still sure they were happy to have me back, in some form. They were very, very supportive to me through that process. So that was my next positive action. And then obviously resilience was key. But before even resilience, it was like setting my mind to I've got to do this. I got to heal myself, not just for me, but for my family, for everybody who's depending on me. So that was step 1, the will. So once I had the will, then I had to have the resilience, which it's forced upon you, but you have to be prepared for all the challenges you're going to go through. So when I talk about resilience and how to become more resilient, one is anticipate the road is going to be bumpy. There's going to be a lot of ups and downs along the way, and mentally prepare for each of those things that you can through that process. So if you're a business leader and you're going to be delivering some tough news to the organization, anticipate all the things that people might say have concerns about and prepare for them, So, just like I would prepare for this interview by, hearing what you like to talk about and sort of what your topics are. So preparing for resilience, to be more resilient is really key. So first, anticipating that there's going to be problems down the road and then preparing for those as much as you can. Of course, there's the unanticipated, and you have to prepare for the unknown as well. But all your preparation leads back to continuing forward. So take the hit, feel that emotional blow, but carry on force, soldier through, and keep going towards your goals and your targets. And your goals and your targets have to be defined, So mine was very easy. Survival was step one, and then full recovery, step two. So everything I did worked towards those goals, and I'm applying that in my life now. I've recently transitioned to full-time high-performance coach and author out of the formerly being an executive in the hospitality industry. And I have very clear goals, and I set them and I work on them every day. So I take time every day to, I'll do like a form of, meditation or contemplation, and then I go through my goals. And I'm very clear about what my goals are. I have particular goals now that I'm, back playing sports again, but more towards, achieving my goals in business, because ultimately I'm running a publishing business at the end of the day. At this point in the author journey, you're doing a lot of marketing and stuff like that. So I reaffirm my goals every day just to make sure I have that clarity, and that every action that I take throughout the day is going to reaffirm and reinforce my direction and hopefully contribute to my long-term success. So a long answer there, but mindset is everything in life. If you have a strong mind, a capable mind, you're going to get better results in your life. And if you have a mind and you let your negative thinking spiral out of control, it's going to control you. Your mind can control you, or you can control your mind. And I wouldn't even like to say the word control. I like to say the word lead. You can lead your mind like you would lead other people. Mm-hmm. If you try to control your mind, it can be an exercise in frustration. No, I don't want this. No, I don't want that. But if you lead your mind with positive focus and purpose and positive goals, that is the way forward through your mind to higher performing mind. But if you try to control elements of your mind, you'll inevitably try to control elements of your life. And when you do that, you're looking for a wrestling match that you're going to lose. Your mind is powerful, and you got to recognize that. And so leading your mind like you would lead a team of people is really the ultimate way to go.
Yeah, I think it's critical. I've read so many books about mindset. One, called Mindset by Carol Dweck, and I kind of maybe started my journey with As a Man Thinketh and Think and Grow Rich, the Bible, lots of, Christian philosophy, Stoic mindset.
I love Stoic
work, and Grit by Angela Duckworth. And, I went on that journey for me, Andrew, because I used to have the mindset that would tell me you're going to fail, you're terrible, you suck, you're a POS. I'll let our audience figure out what that means. And part of that was conditioned in me by a home that I grew up in that was very violent, dysfunctional, abusive, emotionally, mentally, physically, all of those things. And so I had to go to work on my mindset to overcome and lead myself out of that past, right? Lead myself to a brighter future. And one of the books I read during that time was Psycho-Cybernetics. I'm sure you've heard of it as well.
Yeah.
But there's a story in there, and you reminded me of that as you were talking. This mom teaching her son how to drive, and she's telling her son to watch the curb, watch the curb, watch the curb, and sooner or later the son ran into the curb, right? And, she yells at him and she says, Andrew, I told you to watch the curb. And he's like, Mom, I was watching the curb. And, really it was all about focus, right? What was Andrew focusing on? What was Michael focusing on? What are you focusing on versus, what should you be focused on? That's what you reminded me about those goals, because our mind, for some reason, it naturally gravitates toward fear or the worst or what could happen versus or the negative that could happen versus the possibilities that could happen. You want to speak into that a little bit, Andrew?
Yeah, the first thing I would tell people is don't ever try to get rid of that negative. That's a skill, but we don't use it as well as we could. Recognize what could go wrong. Recognize what you don't want to have happen. That gives you clarity about what you do want to have happen. So working with your negative thoughts is a really critical thing, because if you try to fight them or make them go away, you're not going to do it. You're just, like I said, you're going to pull yourself in the wrong direction. So leading your mind, I try to work with every circumstance that comes along. A high-performing mind is about making the most of your circumstances and performing at your best. And one of my specialties in life as a high-performance coach is helping people perform at their best. And, I'll try to give a couple tips on that before the end of this podcast. But, it's it's just, you got to stay focused and keep it positive as possible all the way through, and use those negative thoughts to give clarity to where you want to go. So, before every interview, I have a little bit of nerves that come up, and I'm like, oh, I don't want to like make any mistakes, or I was telling you in the green room that about losing my voice the other day. This can just happen, but that just reaffirms, okay, what I want to do is I want to perform at my best, and it's okay to have those thoughts. Every single athlete, there's a video I see of Ronaldo. He's standing, Cristiano Ronaldo, a great soccer player, one of the top in the world. He's standing in front of before taking a free kick and he's or a penalty shot, and he's something he should be able to do. And he's talking to himself and saying, "You can do this. You've been here before. You can do this again," because the doubts are there. So he is using this positive self-talk to overcome the fact that he's like, "Oh my God, that everybody's depending on me. It's a tie game. We need this for the win." It would be not human to suggest that you're not going to have those thoughts. You have to allow those thoughts to come and say and accept them. And I used to do this little thing back when I competed, but okay, that's what I don't want. Now what do I want? So it just helped keep me clear. So thank you, mind, for doing your job of thinking of all the possibilities. Now that I have those clear and I know what I want, now let's really bring the focus to what we want to do. And that's the first step to performing at your best. And Cristiano Ronaldo went on to sink that goal, and win it for his team or tie it up or whatever it was he needed to do. So it works, and it's a technique that athletes use, and business leaders can use it as well. There's plenty of times, I was a CEO for a stint, and you have tough conversations or board meetings or whatever, and I would mentally prepare for them. I don't want to answer something to lead them in the wrong direction. I don't want to say something that I'll regret later, or, I got to keep my cool if somebody comes at me aggressively, which can happen in those environments. And so by preparing for all those, you become more resilient through that process. And then when it does happen, you're ready, the positive response you want to have, and you can perform at a much higher level and lead everybody in a much better direction.
Yeah, I think we have to also understand the two minds, right? The subconscious and conscious mind. The subconscious wants to keep us safe. And so typically that's the one talking to us about our fears or doubts, because it's trying to keep us safe. That's its job. It reminds us of, oh, you remember the last time you tried to do that. But the mind, the conscious mind, really wants us to grow, wants us to expand. And so learning to lead, maybe listen to the subconscious to help you prepare for that, as you said, that board meeting or that difficult conversation we have to have. I remember, Andrew, I'm 6 years into recording podcasts now. I started in February of 2019, but I probably dabbled with the idea for a couple of years before that. And usually it was the fear of like, who wants to listen to you? What do you have to say? How are you going to share others, right? And I mentioned to you, I wrote in a book called Power Principles, feel fear and do it anyway.
Yeah,
and then take as many people with you as possible, right? And
I love that.
My idea about leadership is I'm going to have fear, but if I can step through that, like through this medium of podcast or any other medium that I speak through, I'm taking others with me. And that's the essence of like leading our mind, leading our self through those challenges that all people, wouldn't you agree that all people deal with some level of fear, even the ones who look most successful?
Absolutely. Everybody goes through it. There are no exceptions. It's just how you deal with it, and people who've struggled have, or gone through serious hardship, go through extreme levels of fear. So maybe they get a little bit more proficient at dealing with more average levels of fear, and it doesn't touch them the same way it would have in the past. You just think of experience. I think of myself as a 20-year-old athlete versus a 35-year-old athlete, and how nervous I got before big tournaments and national championships and stuff like that. Towards the end. And it's the same thing in your first board meeting, you're much more nervous than your 100th. And I'm sure it was the same for you with your podcast process. And I love your thinking about fear. And it's something that I teach in the book, like for people who have trouble with public speaking or performance anxiety before sport. There's a lot of techniques that I provide in the book to help people perform at their best in that moment. And one of them is saying yes to your fear. So the first thing is, step one is like, feel the fear and do something about it. So like if you got this big presentation coming up, prepare. I'm big on preparation. Practice, rehearse. think of all the questions that come up. And then when you go into this situation, you're going to be much better off. So that's the first step, is prepare. And, that's the first step of like dealing with your fear. You have this fear, you have this tremendous energy, take advantage of it, practice, prepare, rehearse. Mm-hmm. Then the next step is what you're talking about. Say yes, go through that fear, because sometimes you don't have a choice. Sometimes someone asks you a question that throws you off and you just carry on through. So you have no choice in a lot of circumstances. So saying yes to your fear and jumping in is the only way. When you have a choice, like, well, am I going to not go into this interview, or am I just going to go through my fear and do my best? That could be for a job interview, that could be a television interview, whatever it is. You carry on through. And then I think that's what you're talking about, that you speak about in your book as well. So yeah, I'm a big believer in that. And I love your angle on take everybody with you. And we would use that a lot in change management. So when there's big change on the horizon, like a capital project of some kind, people are scared naturally. What does that mean for my job? And you're going to go through that fear as a leader, and you're going to try to bring everybody along with you on that journey.
Yeah. So important. It's an important leadership concept, right? Because most people are afraid of change. And even though we live in a world that's constantly changing, more so today than ever, right? I mean, it's constantly, with the advent of AI and all the technology that we see, it's constantly, it's changing faster than, we've ever imagined it would. But I think our job as a leader is to take people with us, because if we get through that change alone, or that fear alone, then we're there on an island by ourselves. And so we've got to take people with us. And again, I mentioned earlier, my son and I went on a 2-week hiking trip, and we hiked in Colorado. We hiked in Utah, all 5 national parks in Utah. We hiked in the Grand Canyon. There were some things that I'm kind of afraid of heights, Andrew. And I used to be in the Army. I've rappelled out of helicopters down a rope, but I'm still deathly afraid of heights. For some reason, I don't know, but I'm still able to do it. And in being able to take my son along with me. Now, there were times he had to take me along with him, because he's less afraid of heights, living on that edge, than I am. And so I think we need partners. You talked about, having a coach to help you through it. Let's talk about the importance of having someone alongside of us, whether it be a leader, a mentor, or a coach, parent, friend, that can kind of walk through those challenges and fear with us, and how that helps with our mindset as well.
I mean, it's so important. And that's what, I took advantage of that as a young professional athlete. I had a coach who had been formerly top 10 in the world, and was able to help guide me through, a lot of the learning that I needed to do to perform at my best. And as leaders in our organizations, we have to do a lot of coaching to help people perform at their best. And that's really what a high-performing mind is all about. It's about helping people perform at their best. And so, I've done a lot of coaching in my life, one-on-one and then in groups. And now those principles were so successful, like creating national champions and people who are top-ranked in the world and all those things, that, and then doing it in business, when I was an executive, helping coach my teams up and always having high performing teams, it all led toward writing this book to be able to help people perform at their best, because, as a leader, you're only as good as your teammates. And, that implies in business and sport and anything else. And so if each individual on your team, as a leader in business as well, I also took the approach of trying to improve each member of my team. So by helping elevate them, you elevate the entire organization. So I think it's key to have a leader in your life. And not all of us are fortunate enough to have great coaches. I was very lucky. I had 2 extraordinary coaches when I was young. One who coached a many-time world champion, and another one who was, almost a world champion herself. And one was male and one was female. So I got 2 very different perspectives. And we're talking things that people are still discovering 30 years later. And I had the benefit of being able to put all that I learned from them and then grew on top of, because we stand on the shoulders of those who teach us. And we take it further. And I was able to put all that into the book. And that was all in my coaching as well. And one reason why we had a high level of success with the people that I worked with is, because of these principles they're timeless. Sometimes people say, well, I've heard that before, but do you do it? Do you do it deeply? really at the end of the day, we have heard a lot about it before. There's a lot of people out there who want to read 1,000 books. I don't believe in that. Like, don't just take in 1,000 pieces of knowledge. Take things and go deeply with them, because that's really where the gold is found. And that's where you're going to learn yourself. Because at the end of the day, you can hear it from your coach, but until you have that aha moment and really understand, and I'm kind of going in a couple of directions here, but that was always my marker of a great coach. That coach that I'd be like, oh my gosh, he told me that 5 years ago. And 5 years later, it's coming up and I'm like, oh, I totally get it now. Like, he told me, I kind of understood it and I thought I understood it, but until I lived it, it wasn't really deep. It didn't really become part of who I was. That's the kind of thing, like, when you put these concepts out there, people, they'll get some of them right away for sure, and they'll have instant improvement, but there's other things that will come out later, and that's something that was really worthwhile. So that's what I've tried to do in A High Performing Mind, is give people these concepts that they can use right away and make instant improvements to their life if they start adopting them. But it's nothing like instant gratification. It's like, make these changes. It will take time, but you will have lasting improvements and lasting success in your life if you do it, because these are the things that high performers around the world do. Having worked with so many, there's commonalities with what they do. And like someone might read this and say, oh, I've heard a lot of these before, but again, I try to take it to a depth to help inspire them to do it more fully and actually do it in their lives. So I think that's a critical piece of the puzzle. One thing is that at the end of each chapter, I have let's make this stick. And the reason for that is I want them to actually do it. I get annoyed. I have, pet peeve to hear people talk about things, and I'm like, you got to actually do it. Take the actions, don't just think it and that it's done or that you have it. Like, go out there and actually do it. And that's where things happen. Great people and high performers, they get up every day and they work towards mastering their craft or becoming the best or whatever it is they're trying to become the best at. It's those actions that get them there. You're not just talking about it.
Yeah, action is the difference maker, right? I mean, in my business, I'm paid to come into companies and work with leaders. And I think the key differentiator for me versus others who do what I do, there's a lot of trainers or coaches that coach and train leadership theory or philosophy. What we do different is we drive behavior change, right? I have a tool that I use to help people change their habits, their leadership behaviors, because you can know the concept, but if you don't make micro steps toward that new behavior you want, you're going to stay the same, or you're going to fall back into that behavior, that habit, because we're all creatures of habit, and we'll fall back into that if we don't make those micro steps forward. I want to talk about something in your book you write about. To have the life you want, you must get really clear on your desire. What's the difference in a want and a desire in your opinion?
I think they're the same thing ultimately, but the differentiator there is the level of intensity that you bring to your wants and desires and your goals. And high performers, David Goggins talks about this in his book. The level of intensity that they have for going after what they want is inspiring, and also it can be off-putting to others who don't understand it, because they go with such an intensity. Like, not many people want to train 5 or 6 or 7 hours a day. Michael Phelps, an incredible athlete, many-time Olympic gold medalist, talked about how he trained 7 hours a day for 5 years and didn't miss a day. I mean, that is the difference between average Joe desire or wants and Olympic gold medalist, best in the world. He's not just a gold medalist. He's the best, one of the best of all time. So that just shows the range. So having desire for something, I desire a piece of cake, but I desire to be the best, or I want to, sell millions of copies of A High Performing Mind. That intensity, that gets you there so much faster than someone who's just dipping in. I kind of want to be sort of successful. I'm going to put a little bit of time here, and I'm going to also do these other things. I'm going to go out with my friends. I'm going to party. Nothing wrong with doing those things, but, having self-restraint and, the discipline to work consistently at the things that you want to achieve in your life is paramount for success, because it helps you achieve that success so much faster. And like, when success starts to take a long time to come because you're not putting your whole self into it, like, that's the recipe for quitting. And quite frankly, 80% of people probably quit on a lot of their dreams because it just didn't happen quickly enough or right away or whatever it was. But those who are destined to be the best or succeed or be CEOs or business leaders or whatever it is, they have an intensity of desire to excel and succeed in their life that is in common. No matter where you are from the world, what culture, it's all the same. They wanted to be the best with an intensity, or they wanted to succeed with an intensity that is incredibly high. And they were willing to align all their actions behind that on a daily basis to make sure that happened.
How does one move from want to desire? Like, how do you make that transition? Like, I want a better life versus you desire. What are some action steps you talk about in your book to kind of make that transition from just a want, I want to lose 20 pounds, versus I desire to lose 20 pounds?
So the want has got to come from within, like the natural desire, but it's something you can build as well. So what happens a lot of times with people, they're like, I kind of want to lose 20 pounds. Well, you've got to start taking the actions to do that. So I talk about something called dirty discipline, and that is a process of building your sense of discipline and your desire level to the next step. And it's by taking little steps towards that desire. So say you want to lose 20 pounds, you're like, I'm not feeling that motivated right now, but I want to be eventually very motivated to do that. Well, that day, do one thing to lose that 20 pounds, even if it's not even going to, scratch the surface much. So that might be one donut instead of 3. Or I'm a chocolate chip cookie guy. I'm going to have 1 instead of 2, whatever it is. Take that one initial step. And then no matter how small it is, a minute or 2 a day, start with I'm going to do 5 push-ups. Like anybody can do 5 push-ups or close to it. Not anybody. Most people can do 5 push-ups, right? So now you've taken your second step. And by taking a little step every day and expanding on that step, okay, so I did 5 yesterday, I'm going to do 6 today, or every day last week I did 5 push-ups. This week I'm going to do 10 or 6 or 7, whatever it is. Building on those steps. Then as you put your time and your effort and your action into it, your passion and desire naturally increase to that next level. And as you see some success, that's reinforcing for that. So, it's a funny thing because I work with a lot of high performers and they all have high levels of desire naturally. Like they have incredibly intense warrior mentality. They want to succeed at all costs. And then recently, in the last couple of years, I started coaching my older son's hockey team, which is, it's not it's not like a AAA team or anything. It's more like an average competitive team. And it was a real eye-opener to work with kids who didn't naturally have this incredible high level of desire to be the best. And I had to find ways to try to motivate them. And by the end of the season, we got them there. So at the beginning, it was like, okay, we're going to be doing this, sprint exercise. And they're all groaning. And so how I got that buy-in over time was showing them, first of all, inspiring them, telling them all the great things that were going to happen to them. Like, you're going to get better. You'll be able to last longer. You're going to feel so much better. You're going to be playing so much better. You're going to get more wins. You can win the league, the championship, all that stuff. So giving them all these great reasons, inspiring them with the great reasons was step 1. But then showing them how, hey, remember how hard that was last time? Look how much easier it is this time. Like, it's still hard, but it's not as hard. Remember the first time you kind of want to throw up at the end of it, but this time you don't, So that was the process I went through to help build that. And then by the end of the season, there was a lot less argument on doing these things, and we had their buy-in. So that's how it kind of increased their desire to do these things and to make the changes that they need to make.
What role, you kind of alluded to this earlier, but what role does visualizing that success help bridge from a want into a desire? So
it's a funny thing to say this, but I purposely left visualizing out of a high-performing mind. Not entirely. It's in there. And there's little bits here and there because there is at times too much focus on visualizing and not enough focus on actions. So visualizing, look, I use visualizing every day still, and more for performance in the moment. Maybe I don't use it for public speaking necessarily, but you can, of course. But also using it for changing my physical behaviors in sport. I want to execute this shot in a particular way and at this high level. So I use a lot of visualizing for that. I use a lot of visualization for creating the vision for what I want to do. Like, okay, I want to be a success in business. I want, a high performing mind to sell millions of copies. And I visualize that every day. But when you're visualizing for long-term things like that, you're not going to see like, you're not going to magically with your mind pop up from 100 sales days to 1,000 sales a day. Actions have to precipitate that, right? Mm-hmm. So it's about getting people back to those actions and taking those steps. But the visualization creates clarity about what you want. And when you have that clarity, then all your steps are very aligned with that naturally. You're like, wow, I'm doing this, but is this really going to get me to where I want to go as quickly as possible? So like I'm doing some social media posts, but I could be emailing bookstores directly, or, I'm same thing with the company. Like I could be speaking to my clients directly to get feedback about how we can do better for them rather than hiring a third party to do that for us. So there's lots of more direct ways. And I believe that visualization is a big key for that. And, when you're doing something that has intricate moves, physical outcomes, like the Blue Angels, is that what they're called? The high performing dynamic team. I'm not saying it properly, but I watched a video recently on how much they visualize all the details. Wow, they have to. They cannot afford a mistake when they're up there. Incredible. And, it leads to performance. Tiger Woods, obviously big visualizer before. You could see him bend over and visualize the shot before he did it. And I do that and it works. But at the end of the day, when it's in things that are longer term, I think that's more for clarity and it keeps us focused on the direction we want to go. And I just try to get people away from, I'm going to manifest this with the power of my mind or magic. But let's get back to, okay, that's important, but let's get back to the actions that are going to get us to where we want to go.
Yeah. I wasn't necessarily talking about manifestation because I think that is not possible in the sense that maybe it's written about, but I'm a big believer. I try to, in my coaching, I try to help people, okay, visualize what do you want? Like just today, I teach every leader I work with, I teach them to have a meeting with self, right? And then I use a couple tools I call a daily GPS or a weekly roadmap, and simply teach them to where do you want to end up at the end of the day, right? It's like that GPS. I'm putting those coordinates in where I want to go. Now, okay, let's work backwards from there. What are the steps, the action steps as you call them? What are the action steps we need to take to end up there with that conversation I've got to have with someone, with that goal that I'm working on, with that speech I'm about to deliver, with that report I've got to complete, those kind of things. So, yeah, I certainly don't believe in like manifesting and it's going to show up. But I think the power of visualizing so that my actions are rightly taken, right?
Exactly.
If we're taking action, there's a lot of people in my work especially, they're busy, but they're not productive. So they take action, but not on the right things. And so I think it's important to visualize kind of that place I want to be in this podcast, right? Where do I want to get to the end of this conversation, and what are the steps we got to take to get there? So I think that's important.
I love that. Like I'll just work off of that. I'll just add to like that is something that is in a high performing mind. So we start off with that base. What's your number one desire? Yeah. And then a little later on, once we've got some steps in place to make sure they have the strength of mind to carry through with the things that I'm asking them to do in the book, around chapter 6, we get into your goals and your vision for your life. Because yes, I totally agree with you. You have to have that clarity about where you're headed. You need to know, this is the end result of where I want to be. So I go through a process to help people get clarity about those goals and break them down and create the action steps, as you mentioned, to walk towards that in the straightest line as possible. Because I don't know about you, but I've always been like, I want to succeed now. So I'm going to take the straightest possible path to that level of success and really avoid a lot of these side trips. And I was like that as an athlete. I'll do everything I can. And I do it now. I've always been that kind of person who puts their whole self into doing things, fully and completely. No excuses, 100% effort, and let's get there as quickly as we can.
Yeah, that's good. You talk about honesty and openness in your book. Dive into that a little bit and how important that is, and to be honest and open with ourselves, but also how that helps us with our mindset and performance.
It's so important. You're not going to get far without being open about what your weaknesses are in life. Mm-hmm. If you're working with an athlete or a business person and they're not willing to admit, oh yeah, I tend to micromanage, or I have this particular weakness in my technique. If you don't have that honesty about what you need to address, then progress is going to be really slow. Like a lot of people talk about work with your strengths. Just focus on your strengths. Don't worry about your weaknesses. And I'm not a believer in that. Yes, for sure, you want to use your strengths to the best of your ability. That is very true. But the part I don't agree with is ignoring your weaknesses. Weaknesses are a gold mine. Like that is where the thing that is holding you back the most is hidden. And if you're willing to address the thing that's holding you back the most from being successful, then you will progress at the fastest possible rate. I have a quote. I don't want to butcher it, but it's if you improve your greatest weakness, you get to improve at the fastest possible rate in the shortest period of time, is essentially the quote from the book. And it's so true. So if you're an alcoholic, that's the thing that's holding you back in your life. Let's be real. If you're an athlete, I don't know. I'm going to make it up. I don't know baseball very well, but probably a lot of listeners do. So forgive me if I'm making a mistake here. But if you're a pitcher and you can't throw a curveball or a knuckleball, that's holding you back. Go and develop that skill. And yeah, you're going to have your specialization pitches, but like address your weaknesses too. It'll make you more well-rounded. It'll teach you about your craft. You'll have a wider understanding of what you're doing, even if you never get good at it. I played this other relatively unknown sport or lesser known sport called ultimate frisbee. And it's actually a great sport, very athletic, and there's some really spectacular plays and stuff like that. But one thing I was never very good at when I started was throwing in the wind. I was actually, like, my level was quite high. Like, I played at a national level, but my throwing in the wind was like amateur, and it became a problem. So I decided, I was scared of it. I hated it. I was like, screw this. I'm going to work at this every day. The windiest days, I'm out there throwing. And trying to improve my confidence, trying to get better at it. And I will tell you, I never got very good at it. I got okay at it for the level I was playing. So it became passable. But I learned so much more about all my throws by throwing in this challenging condition. And I'm a big believer in that, like find the most challenging conditions and perform in that, and that will improve you in ways you could never anticipate. But getting back to what you said, earlier, just so I don't get too sidetracked here, but, it's so important to be willing to look at your weaknesses, being open and honest about what you need to improve. One thing that does is it reduces your ego, which is really important for performance as well. If you want to be the best human being you can be, you can't have a big ego standing in your way. All of us will take those hits, we'll fail, we'll fall flat in our faces. Sometimes they're public. And you got to learn from those experiences and move forward. And it makes you a better human being. So it's all a really important part of the process.
Yeah, so good. I've lived that out, personally. I think I went to work on my ability to public speak. Used to be terrible at it, scared to death of it. I tell people all the time I would take F's in speech class in college because I'd prepare for my speech, but then not show up when it was my time, just scared to death, right? I couldn't overcome that fear. But working on my public speaking and being able to do this podcast has changed my life, right? It was an extreme weakness that when I went to work on it and got better at it and developed it, it's changed. It's the way I pay my bills today, feed my family, grow my business. And so, I'm a living testament to what Andrew just talked about. Go to work on those. If you can go to work on your greatest weakness, it could become your greatest strength. If you're able to, which everything else gets better from there. Would you agree, Andrew? I mean, if you overcome that, like you said, alcohol, if I can overcome the use of alcohol, everything else in my life is going to get better, or any other extreme weakness.
It's so true. Yeah, it's so true. I mean, I love your public speaking example as well. I also used to have a lot of anxiety about public speaking. I had no choice in my particular career because there was a lot of it, so I had to just plow through. But, I'd use notes and all kinds of things to help me through. And, you talked in the green room about taking one take. Well, sometimes I've taken 30. It can happen to the best of us, right? So it's just the way it goes. And yeah, it can have such a profound effect on your life. There's those weaknesses in your life that affect every area of your life. And alcohol or drugs would definitely be two examples of that. And there's some weaknesses that, affect one very specific part of your life. And I had one in my sport. I wasn't very good at attacking in a particular situation. And I was very sensitive about it because I was self-conscious that it was a failure that I had or a shortcoming that I wasn't sure I could improve. And so I didn't like talking about it. I didn't like hearing about it. I was embarrassed. And when it happened publicly, because you play in front of crowds, I was embarrassed, and it would cause me to perform at a lower level. And, it got to a point one time where I had this opportunity to beat this guy who was ranked about 50 in the world, which would have been a really good win for me. And I went up 2-1, and I ended up losing that particular match because of that weakness. And I was like, screw it. I'm every single day for 2 hours on top of my regular training, I'm going to work on that weakness until I'm better at it. And I'll tell you that the progress was slow, but it became a lifelong skill that to this day, I didn't play sports for 8.5 years because of my illness. I pick up a racket and I'm hitting that particular attacking sequence as well as I ever have in my life, as well as I could hope for in a lot of ways. And that time that I put in was for life. If we're willing to work on our weaknesses, you get to improve for the rest of your life. Like, what could be more motivating than that? It's like you're going to change your life for the better, and you're going to enjoy so much more happiness and fulfillment and so many more rewards in your life. You couldn't ask for more. So just, if anybody's listening who's thinking about it, just do it. Start today, start small, and be consistent. Go day by day and make that change, because you'll never regret it.
Yeah. I've given a lot of free speeches to get better, right? Before I was good enough to get paid for it. So, Andrew, I love this topic, as we talked about before we actually started the recording. This mindset, I think it's everything. It's because I went to work on my own mindset that my life changed, right? I carried for the first maybe 20 or so years of my life a pretty poor mindset. Had some successes, but didn't believe in myself enough, that self-worth, self-esteem. So I had to I had to start studying. So I just want to implore our leaders to study. There's all kinds of great books out there. One of them is A High Performing Mind by our guest today, Andrew Thompson. Andrew, tell us where we can find out more about you and get a copy of the book.
Oh, thank you. So High Performing Mind actually just won a couple of award recently, so I'm pretty happy about that. It was a nice recognition for the book. Also hit #1 bestseller status on Amazon recently. So yeah, of course you can find it in any Amazon or any bookstore around the world, pretty much for the most part. So easy to find. You can order it online, and it'll be there in a few days. Also, there's my website, andrewdthompson.com. All the Andrew Thompsons were taken, so I had to bring my middle name into it. So it's andrewdthompson.com. I got a good following on YouTube, so a lot of videos from podcasts and stuff there, and some stuff I put out, as well as my social media can use a lot of help. So anybody who wants to follow me, I'm very grateful, because for many years I found social media to be a distraction, and now I'm come crawling back to social media and I'm like, please help me promote things. Mm-hmm. So I am using it now, whereas while I was in business, I didn't need it the same way. I just felt like my time there wasn't time spent towards achieving my goals, so I kind of put it to the side. But now I'm using it in the best way I can to kind of spread my message and share some of the methods and techniques in a high performing mind. So I appreciate you asking. Yeah,
we'll make sure we get all those links in the show notes, listeners. So if you're interested in connecting with Andrew, make sure you check out the show notes to be able to do that. Andrew, I agree with you on social media. I believe it's one of the worst things for mindset, high-performing mindset, that you can possibly participate in. But if you use it for growth, you use it for connecting with people to help you think better, that's a great way to do it. And that's the way I learn a ton from social media. And people, that's where I found you, by the way, on Facebook. So you can use it for good. The other thing I like about Andrew's book, listeners, is it's practical, tactical, which is who I am, right? You know that by listening to Leadup Podcast. We're going to give you practical, actionable steps that you can take at the end of every chapter. Andrew gives you some homework, like, okay, now let's apply what we've learned, right? And so if you want to take baby steps in improving your mindset, becoming a high-performing mindset person, Andrew's got a great tactical book to help you do that. Andrew, thanks for being a great guest on the Leadup Podcast.
Thank you so much, Mike, for having me. It was a pleasure to be here.